When somebody says, did the Exodus story happen? Did the Jews enslaved in Egypt break free of their slavery and move to the Promised Land across the desert for 40 years? Did that happen? You have also said, of the Exodus specifically, it's still happening.
Yes.
Now, to me, that's far more inappropriate than saying that the Spirit is still moving across the face of the waters, because I think what people mean there is, do you believe that these people in that time period actually did this in such a way that, for instance, might show up in an archaeological report?
Well, I think that's the simplest answer to that is probably.
Sure, and that's fine too. But
we don't know. I mean, to the degree that there's been archaeological investigations into the kinds of biblical narratives that you've described, the archaeological evidence tends to fall on the side of historical accuracy in relationship to the Bible, quite surprisingly often.
Clearly you're...
Wait, hold on. Just to be clear, my understanding is there's zero historical accuracy. Or I'm sorry, there's zero historical evidence for Jews ever mass exiting Christ, Egypt. There's no evidence for any exodus of Jewish people from Egypt, ever. I don't think that's ever been displayed anywhere, archaeologically, historically. I think the Bible is one of the things. I think the Bible is the only source for that.
You spent more time in Exodus than probably any person I've ever met in person, right? Clearly the story sort of captivates you and you think it's really important and can teach us a lot, right?
Yeah,
of course.
It's an infinitely deep story.
I think most people speaking to you already know that you think that, right? And so when they ask you a question, when they suddenly say to you, but do you think it really happened?
Well, what the hell does that mean?
Oh my, what do you mean? What does it mean? How do you not know? These are like fun things to like smoke weed and jerk off and talk about. What do you mean? Did it actually factually happen? Like factually in history, were there thousands or tens of thousands or whatever of Jewish people that fled, Egypt and crossed the Sinai? Like, did that actually happen? That's pretty obvious what people mean. They're asking you for a material, factual analysis, right?
Okay, so fine. So it's easy just to turn this around. It's like, okay, what exactly happened in your historical account when Moses encountered the burning bush?
I don't need to know exactly what happened. What I need to know is...
I'm not asking you specifically or attacking you for that.
What I need to know is that if I sort of went to the Egyptian desert at sort of the time that the story is alleged to have taken place in history, would I see a mass movement of Israelites from Egypt into the Promised Land? Would I see people with feet walking through the desert, leaving footprints?
Well, let's take it apart rationally. So,
oh my God, Alex just asking, like, materially, what do we see? Like, what is the material, physical reality of what we see?
Also understand that when someone's asking that, and like, even if you don't like the question, you must understand what someone's asking.
Oh yes, well, I understand many of the things that they're doing simultaneously.
You must also...
How did it feels like somebody introduced Peterson to philosophy like last week, except for years and years, where every single question, like, did you go to the store yesterday? Well, now that's an interesting question. Yesterday? Well, what do you mean by that? Like Monday, Tuesday, today's Tuesday, Monday. Well, it's an interesting question if you really think about it. And when I go somewhere, well, go where? Well, I was in Florida and I was still in Florida when I went there. Have I really moved at all? Or do you mean is my position in the universe changing? I'm like, did you physically walk to the store and go inside and buy? Now, when you say buy, some people, consider the stealing of profits from workers to be theft. And can I truly buy with something that I've never actually earned on my own before? Is it not a form of theft to transfer the theft from the worker to the store owner when I purchase things with dollars earned? Like, it just feels like his answer to everything is just the most ridiculous. Can you not contextually understand a single thing that's ever being said to you? Jesus.
I'm not asking you specifically or attacking you for that.
What I need to know is that if I...
Like, we're not engaging in an... Like, there are ways that you could meaningfully interrogate presuppositions. Oof. There are ways that you could meaningfully interrogate presuppositions to have an interesting conversation, right? An 18-year-old tells you, I just got out of a 3-year relationship. I feel like my life is over. I think I was in love with her. Well, hold on. You're 18. What do you mean when you say in love, right? It might be good to actually introspect on that, right? You're young, how you feel about a particular, right? There are times when it's good to critically analyze the foundations of either concepts or even words that we're using, where it makes sense. Like, okay, yeah, right? But there are other times where it's just like pretentious and the purpose isn't like the purpose for interrogating concepts should be to gain insight, not to obfuscate. Right? The purpose should be that when I'm asking these questions, it's because it's actually getting us more insight into the question itself. Not like I'm asking the question just to obfuscate and make the conversation meaningless.
Went to the Egyptian desert at sort of the time that the story is alleged to have taken place in history. Would I see a mass movement of Israelites from Egypt into the Promised Land? Would I see people with feet walking through the desert, leaving footprints?
Well, let's take it apart rationally. So,
but you also understand that when someone's asking that, and like, even if you don't like the question, you must understand what someone's asking.
Oh yes, well, I understand many of the things that they're doing simultaneously.
You must also understand that when you then say it's still happening, people just go, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, well, I would say that's not my problem.
But now, when he says that's not my problem, it is your problem. Remember, the whole point of language is to make things understood to other minds. Otherwise, there's literally no point in language. You're uttering meaningless sounds, right? If I walk around and go, blah, 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 right? And I'm just saying things all day that mean nothing. I'm invoking the concept of like a private language. Like, oh, well, what do these things mean? Nothing. Well, I mean, they mean things to me, but not to anybody else. Okay, then it's meaningless. But in that case, why bother speaking to anybody else at all? The only reason we speak is to, invoke thoughts or evoke thoughts from other people's minds, right? I utter words so that other people think of things in response to what I'm saying. That's the only reason. If nobody can understand what you're saying, then you're engaging in like a fruitless, pointless, absurd, I guess, exercise of just uttering meaninglessness.
Here's the thing, for example. So like take a piece of trivial fiction like Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Right? We say like, okay, did that happen? Now
Oh God. Peterson isn't going to give an answer to this question. He's going to say, well, I don't know. Did it? Did it happen? I mean, we see it on film. We can see the movie. We can watch it. So something happened.
I think that what you'd probably say is something like, well, I don't think the events literally occurred, but I think that they obviously get at something that's sort of perennially true about human nature.
Exactly.
And suppose I said
That's
to you,
right.
but
So
hold on,
they happened. They existed as a pattern.
But there's a scene in Forrest Gump when I think he meets the president. Is it JFK at the time? I think he goes and meets John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
And so I said to you, well, is JFK like that specific part of that story? Is it true that JFK was the president?
Right.
And you would probably just say, yeah.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say anything more complicated. And even though the subject as a whole, like, is Forrest Gump true? Is Hamlet true? That's a complicated question.
Very.
I disagree. That's not a complicated question. No. If you take a collection of things and you're asked to make a conclusion about all those things, if only one like part of those things is false, I think you would say that it's not true, right? If I tell you a story that Barack Obama was the president of the United States and Barack Obama was a black man and Barack Obama had a wife and Barack Obama could fly with the lift produced by his massive arms, would you say that whole statement, would you say that statement is true? The answer would be no. That is not a true statement. No, absolutely not. Logically, right? Logic, capital L, whatever. Like logically, the statement is not true because there's some element here. You've incorporated too much into it and parts of it aren't true. So the whole statement itself can't possibly be true, right? But if you want to, but I mean, like when people talk about is Forrest Gump true, they're not asking if some smaller part of it is true. They're asking if the entirety of the thing is true. The answer would just be no. Now, if you want, you could have an interesting conversation about breaking things down to their elements and which parts are true and which parts aren't true, and what does it mean for something to be true here, right? Like if something happens in a film and it's shown on film and somebody asks, did that actually happen? Well, when they say that, what are they actually referring to? Are they referring to the thing on film? Well, of course that happened. It was recorded. Are they referring to the event that the thing on film refers to? Well, yeah, of course, it's referring to another event. Are they talking about did the actual event that it referred to happen in the exact way that it was shown on film, right? There's a more complicated way you can break down that in particular, but when you're talking about a macro level thing, you're incorporating a lot of other things. If anything isn't true, you would just say the thing itself is not, no? Like
you wouldn't say anything more complicated. And even though the subject as a whole, like, is Forrest Gump true? Is Hamlet true? That's a complicated question.
Very.
But specifically, when I say, but interestingly, there's this little point I want to make in this broader discussion. Do you think that JFK was actually the president? We say yes.
Why do you think it matters to people? Like, I don't know. These are ancient accounts. Let's
maybe
say
that's the biggest problem. Maybe that's the biggest problem that you have with people who are asking these questions.
It is. Like, what point are you trying to make here? So the point is, I know what the point usually is the people who are asking the question believe that true and unerringly means objectively happened in history, like the things that we're seeing right now happen.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, that's not.
The problem, interestingly enough, maybe is it almost feels like, I don't know if he does it. It almost feels like Jordan Peterson connects a moral truth. This is similar to the bubbles thing or whatever. People are connecting things, premises with conclusions or whatever. It feels like Peterson, to some extent, connects like the moral value of whatever message he gets from a metaphor or allegory. He connects that to the underlying factual reality. So when somebody questions that factual reality, he thinks that they're necessarily discarding the moral message from the allegory or the metaphor. So when somebody says to Jordan Peterson, I don't actually think that Jews did Exodus from Egypt. I don't think they did cross that. I don't think that happened. What Peterson is hearing and what he's emotionally feeling is, I don't believe in the moral story of Moses wandering the desert for days. I don't believe that. I don't believe in the morals of that story. I don't believe in the messaging of that story. I don't agree with your moral conclusions from that story. That's what he's hearing. So he has to fight on that premise one. He has to fight on that factual ground because he can't concede any of that. So instead he has to obfuscate. Well, when you say Jews in the desert. Well, what desert? What Jews? What time period? When you say happened, what do you mean by happened? And when you say evidence, he has to fight on every single thing because his moral truths that he's fighting for here are like directly connected to whatever underlying metaphysical understanding he has of the events, right? Where metaphysical is like how we define like, what things, what are like the materially real things in the world or whatever. Like these things have to be real events because he's deriving moral truth from them. And if the things, like it can't be stories. Like Jordan Peterson seems like a guy who we're like, the Garden of Eden, well, that's just like an allegory or that's just a metaphor. He's like, no, hold on. That story needs to be real. If it's not real, like metaphors, I guess like ironically enough, it's like he's destroying allegory in his mind. Like allegory, nothing can be allegorical. It can't be real. There can't be, I'm sorry, it has to be real. There can't be metaphors. They have to be real. You can't tell stories. They have to be real things. They all have to be real because if they're not real, somehow the moral meaning is lost or something, I guess. I don't know. That's what it feels like he's saying, which is absurd.